Welcome back to My Conscious Dad on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Today, our show is called You Can't Win an Argument. And before we went on a break, we were talking about being unconscious and going into reaction. And I actually have a question for you, Dad. What can I do to avoid or I guess practice staying neutral and not going into reaction?
I think it starts with you giving yourself permission to allow people to have an opinion. Like, you have to just tell yourself it's okay that other people have their own opinion, and they earn that right, and they have that right, and God give them that right. So you just got to humble yourself and say, look, everyone sees it a different way, and that's just how you see it. And for me as a life coach, if I didn't allow people to have their opinions, I'd be in an argument all the time to try to get people to see it my way. So what I learned how to do is allow people to have their opinion, which doesn't ever get you in resistance or defensive or trying to muscle them into seeing it your way. So then what that does is, by letting them have their opinion, then I go to the neutral, like, that's interesting. I can see how you see it like that. And then which goes to the next step, because some people are like, okay, great, I can practice that part where I can allow them to see it like that, but now how do I get them to see it my way? Right now, everyone's coming out of the WordWorks going, okay, great, now how do I get them to see it my way? So after you are neutral and you allow them to have that opinion, and then you say, that's interesting, I can see how you see it like that. And then the next step is you saying, have you ever considered this possibility? Or have you ever considered it that this could be a different way of looking at it? And then now what it does is it gives you an opening for you to paint the picture of your perception and how you see it. And so my job as a coach is to see things multiple ways. So if you come to me with an issue in your life, my job is to open up 5, 6, 7, 12 different ways to look at it than the 1 or 2 or 3 ways that you look at it. And that's what makes me good as a life coach, is that I've trained myself to shift my perspective in so many ways that I can open up different possibilities for you to see it that way. And let's say you came to me and you have this one scenario and it's really bugging you. And it's the way that you see it and it's right. And you're like, but Alex, my kid, and then you just went on this tangent. And I said, okay, that's one way to look at it. And you probably have 1, 2, 3 different ways. But if I can open up a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th way, is that helpful to you?
Yeah.
And if I can open up an 8th, a 9th, a 10th way for you to see it, is that helpful to you?
Yeah, it's helpful if I choose to see it as helpful.
That's right. And so it's my job to try to paint that picture for you to see it more than the 1 to 3 ways that you can see that possibility. If I can open up a 5th, a 6th, a 7th, now all of a sudden you go, you know what? I never considered that. And then my response would be, well, that's why I'm the coach. That's why my job is to have you see it like that. And that's really what my job is. It's not that I know anything more or better or different than you. First of all, I'm not in it like you, so I don't see it like that. I'm a third party from the outside looking in. And that's what makes coaches so valuable. If you have a coach or a mentor or somebody that you go to, is that they don't see it the way you see it. And that's why we go to other people to say, give me your advice. How do you see this? And I think that's what the greatest tool of having a coach is, having someone give you a different perspective. Well, the way that I see it is like that. And you go, oh my God, and I never saw it like that. And so then now your job is to try to see it the way that your coach sees it. Try to see it the way that your dad sees it, the way your mom sees it. Try to see it the way your son or daughter sees it. Put yourself in their shoes and go, okay, I never considered that. Of course you would see it like that, because you're a 12-year-old boy. Of course you would see it like that because you're a 16-year-old young girl that has a lot of resentment towards me, or has a lot of things that you're holding on to regarding me. Does that make sense? So once you're able to put yourself in their shoes and see it the way they see it, it kind of frees you up from trying to argue and make them see it the way that you do.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing you say about, having a coach and everything is, if you feel like you need it, or you need the extra help, or you want to develop yourself, that's great. But a lot of that could also come from you. If you can see the possibilities on your own. But also, I know what my friends and I do is I'll give them scenarios when they're upset at their parents. I'll say, well, what if they're going through this right now, whatever. And then I started doing that so much that I have this one friend who does it back to me. And so I hate it because I'm trying to vent and be a victim and be upset at my parents. And she's giving me all the stuff that I've been giving her for years. And
That's
I'm like,
awesome.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh. But
You're training her how to coach you.
Right. So if you can be that for your friends, nobody's perfect. So you're never going to be, the perfect coach to your friends. But if you could be that to your friends, eventually you're going to teach them how to be in a relationship with you. And from there, you guys can all kind of be your own little balancing board and help each other out.
And what's cool about you practicing how to see things a different way for someone else, you're actually teaching yourself that practice. You're teaching yourself that art form. How do I keep shifting my perspective so I can see things multiple ways? And personal power, in case you've missed any of our shows, when we talk about personal power, really where it all boils down to is perspective shifting. That's it. How many different ways can I look at this one scenario until I find the third, the seventh, the 12th, boom, the 15th one? That choosing that perspective, now that empowers me. But all the 1 to 14 they're all disempowering to me. But if I can find the one perspective that really empowers me, that's the one I'm going to choose. Otherwise, why would you choose any other perspective that disempowers you for when you can actually find one that does empower you?
Again, coming back to the arguments, I think that the only thing that will trump what you just said is the need or the power or the want to be right.
That's right. You're looking for some kind of a goodie. When we're in an argument, you're in an argument because you're trying to get some kind of a goodie, a payoff. What's the payoff for you? The payoff for me is to be right. There's a good possibility that I have this interpersonal, unconscious addiction to being right about the way that I see it. Not just with my mom, not just with my dad, not just with my kids, but everybody. And so when you can really take a deep, honest look at that and go, wow, what would my life look like if I gave up that need to be right about everything? And what's funny is you'll have some people that are listening to the show and they're like, that's awesome, Alex. You're just describing my husband or you're just describing my wife. And I'm the opposite. I don't like to be right. And so therefore I give in on all the arguments. I'm the one that's always going, okay, honey, you're right. I'm the one that's afraid of confrontation, so I'm always just going with it. And maybe that's one of my problems, is that I never try to be right, and so I always give in. But I feel like I'm always taking the brunt of it. Have you ever had that kind of glimpse of what it's like to be afraid of confrontation and then always give in or always let other people be right all the time? Because then you have that side of the spectrum too.
Yeah, I know I like to be right and I like to argue with my family and everything, but in my relationship, I'm very... Not that I don't want to be right, but I don't really care about being right. And I know that's probably going to backfire eventually, but a lot of the times I give in. And I never really say, oh, yeah, you're right, because he's never right. But I'll say, okay, and then I'll end the argument because I don't want to get in an argument. So I've seen, I guess, both sides. For me, and I guess this is a question for you and the people who are also like this, I'll give my point, then they'll give theirs, and then if I go back with my point again, now I'm arguing. Or if they start and give their point and I give mine and they say, yeah, but, and then say the same thing they just said, I won't go back with the argument or with my point again, because I've already stated my point. They just want theirs to be more known again, because they don't say, or he doesn't say anything different. He just says the same thing again. So because
right, and so now this forces you to figure out how to say it in a different way.
Right. So for me, I don't say it in a different way. I just say okay, and
right.
I end it there.
Right, because now all of a sudden the game required for you to figure out how to reinvent yourself, how to find new words to articulate what you're saying so that it makes sense to him, whoever him is. And a lot of times, my job as a coach, if I'm trying to get somebody to see it in a different way, what I'll do is I'll stop and I'll pause and go, and you'll hear me say this. You probably heard me say it a lot, where I'll go, let me try to say this in a different way. And then I'll just find a different scenario, or I'll paint a different picture. Or if I know that you like something like golf, I'm going to try to find a golf scenario that I can paint that picture for you that you go, oh my God, now I get it. Or if I know you like to work on cars as a mechanic, I'll think of a scenario in a mechanic's world where I can paint that picture about, a part that's not working, properly. And so I'm always trying to figure out how to say things in a different way so that it might take the third or fourth or fifth time for them to go, oh my God, okay, now I can see that. It finally took for you to say it in terms that I can understand. And then I was able to see it like that. And you don't have that. You haven't developed that ability yet, or you haven't found out how to do that, or no one's taught you how. And so that's, I think, the learning curve for you. But once you do learn how to do that, you're going to kill it. You're going to hit home runs. And you're going to learn how to reinvent yourself and go, okay. And it takes a little bit of patience, because you'll scratch your head and you'll go, all right, let me see if I can say it in a different way. And then when you'll say it a second way, and then they're still not getting it, and you go, okay. And then you might, sometimes, I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes I'll be at a restaurant and I'll go, all right. And I'll grab the cup and I'll go, okay, this is you. And then I'll grab the salt and I'll go, okay, this is your mom. And I'll grab, you know what I'm saying? And I'll find, and then sometimes I'll find like things to paint a picture for somebody, because that's how they see things.
Yeah, and I could see how that's a lot more powerful than repeating the same thing you've been saying over and over again, but louder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're just raising your voice going, can you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth, right? Instead of doing that, you're getting more creative and going, all right, let me figure out how to put it in terms that you can actually understand. And that takes an ability for you to really be committed to figuring out how to speak in a way or articulate in a way that they actually, it lands on their end and they go, oh, now I got it. And that's the average person doesn't see their relationships, and they're not that committed to figuring out how to help each other.
Yeah, and what's pretty cool about that is if you do it enough times, maybe they'll pick it up and they'll start doing it. Like I said, with your friends, you teach them how to, be in relationships with you. So hopefully if you do things enough time, they'll pick it up and start doing it.
So let's get back to, you can't win an argument. And we talked about that. The reason why is because once you're in an argument, you're not winning. All you're there to do at that point is to be right. And then you're making the other person wrong. And, that's a win-lose. It's not a win-win. So win-win looks like never getting into an argument. How do we do that? For one, you don't make the other person wrong. You hear their opinion and then you validate it. A lot of times people don't validate the other person's opinion. Hey, you know what? I never considered that. Or, hey, that's a good idea. Or, hey, that's interesting. Or, you have to first validate their opinion. And there's ways that you can do it in a neutral way, even if you don't agree with it. Right? I never considered that before. That doesn't mean you're agreeing with it. It's just you're just not devaluating it. So I think the first thing is to validate that they actually have an opinion. You're honoring their own choices, and you're honoring their voice. When somebody stands up and shares their opinion, you're just going, thanks for sharing that. I never considered that before. What you're doing is you're honoring that they have a voice. And a lot of times your kids, especially when they're 9, 10, 12, 13, they're needing for you to validate that their opinion matters, even if it's not right, or even if you don't see it that way. They need you to validate that they have a voice. They need you to honor that, and then validate that their opinion at least matters, even if you don't agree with it or not.
And what would you say to somebody that's listening? Because I kind of used to think like this too. So what would you say to somebody that's listening, and if they were to respond in an argument saying, I never thought of it like that, or I've never considered that? What if to them they think that that's giving up or losing, saying, I never considered that, is kind of like saying you're right.
Yeah, and that's exactly what comes up, is the fear comes up. And you got to remember, anytime you're in some kind of dysfunction, or you're not winning in any area of your life, a lot of the time it's what's underneath that is fear. I'm afraid that. And a lot of times parents will say, I don't want to do that because this will happen. And then I'll ask them, okay, great. Let's go underneath that and ask you, what are you afraid of if you actually say that? And then they have to look at themselves and go, wow, well, then I'd have to be afraid that my son will hear that what I'm saying, that when I'm saying to them, that's interesting. What I'm afraid is that they're saying that, yeah, I agree with you, and I don't. but they're not hearing that the validation of, that's interesting, is only just the first phase of it. There's a second phase that you're not following through with. The first phase is just allowing them to be heard and validating that they actually have an opinion. And then the second phase is, now that I've validated that you have that opinion, let me share my opinion, and maybe that'll shed some light on you seeing it a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're saying you can not agree, but if you have the perception that it's agreeing, or you're afraid of them thinking it's agreeing, you can say that and then follow it up with your opinion too.
Well, you might not necessarily be agreeing with it. All you're doing is validating that what they're sharing, that you're honoring, you're honoring their opinion. And what I was going to go back to saying is, what would it be like if we created these agreements in our relationships, that we agree to disagree? What would our relationship look like? Even you and I right now, if we just decided, what if we just from this point forward, we started to agree to disagree? Like, we have an agreement that it's okay that we don't see it the same way. And at the end of the day, we can still give each other a hug and say, I love you, and move on. Because I'm not trying to get you to see it my way. I don't get any goodie from me to have you agree with me all the time. Because then all I'm doing now is creating a follower, and I don't want to create a follower. In fact, I don't really want you to agree with me all the time. I want you to have your own voice. I want you to have your own opinion. What I'd like to do, though, is help influence it, help inspire you to see it from a greater perspective. I don't want you to be my follower. I want to create leaders. As a dad, I want to create many leaders that think for themselves. In order for me to do that, I got to plant some seeds. I got to throw out possibilities for you to go, Dad, I never considered that before. That's all. But I'm not trying to get you to see it my way or think the way I think. I'm just trying to get you to be open to possibilities that you might not have considered before.
And I know this is not necessarily the audience that we'd be talking to, but there are some people out there who don't want their kids to be leaders. They want them to follow them.
That's true.
And I know that's a different show and a completely different topic, but if you are a parent to, let's say, I'm a mom and my husband is that way, there's some things that need to be done in that relationship before you have kids so that doesn't get instilled in them.
Now that's a whole different show, talking about having kids, before we're conscious or before we start the journey of consciousness. By the time we realize we have kids, and most of us don't like to think that we're unconscious. In fact, 98% of the people, if you ask them if they're unconscious or conscious, 98% of them are going to say, I'm a conscious parent. Everyone gives themselves that title. You don't know you're unconscious until you've done some kind of work, or somebody actually puts you in a scenario where you see how unconscious you really are. And then all of a sudden you go, oh my God. And that's where you have this profound awakening. I never knew I was unconscious until I had that epiphany, until I had that wake-up call, and it came in a very profound experience in a training room where I got to see myself honestly for the first time in my life. Prior to that, my ego had me convinced that I knew what the heck I was doing.
Yeah, I don't really see too many people who go, yeah, I'm unconscious, and then go about their day. They usually say, yeah, I was unconscious, but now I'm working on being a much more conscious parent or person.
Yeah, and it's a process. We're just all at different levels, but the trick is how much more conscious can I become every day, all day long? And am I committed to learning how to be a more effective parent, to be a more conscious parent, be aware and proactive? And that's the journey that we're all on. And I hope that you and I having this discussion and just opening up this possibility has people really look at themselves like that in a deeper way.
Yep, sounds good. Stay tuned for more of My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to My Conscious Dad on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. If you're just joining us today, our show is called You Can't Win an Argument. And if you missed any of it or you want to hear it again, you can always find our podcast online.
And when it comes to, you can't win an argument, just decide that from this point forward, in making conscious efforts, that you're never going to engage into an argument, because it takes two people to be in an argument. If you're ever in one, just stop yourself and realize, wow, I'm in this relationship, I'm in this argument because I'm actually co-creating it. I'm part of the problem. In your resisting their opinion, in your wanting to make their opinion wrong, in you not validating that their opinion is important or it matters or it has some validity, whether you agree or not. And I think the last thing is that you, when it comes to never getting into an argument, is really focusing and noticing that the way that you're showing up to them is that even in your words, you're at least implying that they don't know better. You're implying that they're not smart. And you might not be saying that, but that's what they could be interpreting as. So what you're saying now is that I don't know what's best for me, right? You can hear someone else. When I just said that, all of a sudden you went, oh my God, that's my mom. Oh my God, that's my son. So what you're saying is that I don't, right? And that's how they interpret it, because you might not be saying the words, but through their perception, it's from the way that they see it, you're implying that they don't have the right answer, that they're dumb, that they're not smart enough to think for themselves and all that kind of stuff. You get all that comes into play too.
Yeah, and even though that stuff isn't necessarily your fault or your doing,
or necessarily real, it's not really what you're saying, it's how they're perceiving it.
Right. And I think when you're in relationships with people, you're kind of responsible for adjusting your words so that people can, or speaking carefully so that those people can hear it the way you want to say it. It's like you have to customize it according to those relationships.
Only if the relationship with you is important. If it's not important, you can easily hide behind, well, I don't care. That's the way you perceived it. And I don't care what you think about it. You can sit there all day long and justify that. But if you getting along with them and you guys having a great relationship is important, then it might do you some good to decide that you might want to pick your words carefully. And a lot of people don't want to have to do that. They're like, well, that's the way you heard it, and it's not what I said. And then all the stubbornness comes in, rather than, okay, if that's what you heard, let me try to say it in a different way. But I think more importantly, when it comes to relationships, if you're proactive and you're conscious, you can create an agreement with people. Your husband, your wife, your kids. Sit them down and say, look, I know you're 13 now, and you think you know it all. And I'm not going to say that you don't know it all. And I'm not going to say you don't know what's best for you. What I can share with you is my perspective of what I think is. And if we both sit down and can have an agreement that we can have discussions, and if we are both open to the possibility that, I'm open to the way you see it, and if you can be open to the way I see it, we might actually find some common ground in there, and we might actually learn from each other. What would that be like if you had parents that actually sat down and created that kind of an agreement with you?
Well, first of all, there would be a lot more, I guess, respect and understanding versus more of that I told you so or I'm right kind of thing. I know that when I was growing up, I had a lot of either aunts or cousins or whoever who would say, well, you're not old enough to know yet, or you don't have enough worldly experience to understand the situation, but this is what you should do.
And I probably did some of that too, and you probably won't want to throw me under the bus, but I'll own up to some of that, and probably because whether I did it consciously or unconsciously, I'm sure that I implied a lot of times that you don't know what's best for you. And to be quite honest with you, I think as parents we don't give our kids enough credit. Our kids are really intelligent, they're really smart, and a lot of times they know what's best for them. They might not know how to explain it. They might not know how to articulate in a certain way, and that's where you come in. Your job is to help them make sense of it, help them facilitate a process to decide what is best for them, with them driving it 80%, and then you nurturing it 20%.
Yeah, and I also think that even if you know or you think you know what's best for them and they don't, there's still a way to share that without telling them, I know, here's why you don't.
That's right. I know what's better for you. There absolutely 100% is a way for you to get them to see it your way. But what it's going to take is for you to figure out how to reinvent yourself. You have to learn a whole new way of speaking. You need to learn, get your master's degree in communication, and you don't necessarily need to go to school to learn that. You just got to be committed to learning how to speak, how to articulate yourself, how to put words together to help have other people hear it in a way that empowers them rather than makes them hear it in a way that disempowers them. That is, when your kids hear you, are they hearing you that you're making them bad and wrong? in feeling stupid, or do they hear you like you're empowering them and honoring that they have a voice, and you're planting these seeds on the other side of the fence so that those seeds sprout?
Yeah, and I think what a lot of parents do, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what a lot of parents do is they start off committed to having their child win, but after a while it turns into their commitment to being right, or their commitment to control and telling them what to do.
Absolutely, 100% control. So let's jump on that real quick before we end the show. When you're a parent and your kids are little, your job is to manage their outcomes. Your job is to control them to a certain point. Don't go there, honey. Don't do this. Don't do that. That's your job. You're a controlling style parent. Now, a conscious parent realizes that's not going to work forever. I need to learn how to reinvent my parenting style, and I have to learn how to shift into that of a coaching parent. So right around the age 7 or 8, you start learning how to ask them questions so they can come up with their own conclusions and draw out their own answers for themselves. And a lot of parents don't learn that. No one teaches them that. They don't have that awakening. And so there you are at 15, 16 years old, you're trying to still control your kid. And you don't realize that that's the natural progression as a teenager to flap their wings and find their own independence. They don't want you to control them anymore, and that's where you start to butt heads. And it's the conscious parent that realizes that and makes that shift adjustment.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for joining us today on My Conscious Dad with me, Jasmine Urbina, and my dad, Alex Urbina. We're here every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.